Hello, and welcome to Let's Talk About Wargames, the podcast where we talk about wargames. I'm Jack, and with me here today, as always, is Joe. How's it going, Joe?
It's going all right, Jack and everybody.
Yeah, it's going okay. We're recording this for reference, January 11th, 2021. The focus of what occurred recently that's not at the focus of our podcast, but if it sounds like I'm experiencing horrors beyond comprehension, that's why.
It's been a very trying couple days to keeping track
These
of
have
everything.
been some trying times, you know? People were saying that COVID was trying times, but I think that now is even trying-er times.
Yeah, you got to stack on top of each other. Got to have the disease on top of, sedition.
Coup
Yeah.
attempt. The coup attempt and looming second potential coup attempt in a few days.
Yeah, this is it. Coming from Canadian, it's rough sitting here and watching this all happen, knowing that I have literally no way of doing anything but shouting into the void about how crazy this is.
I mean, I live near DC, and all I can do is just sit here. It's like, this rules, man. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's just be a warning to any future listeners or Canada, since you guys are about 20 years behind us on the political path. Like, look out.
People. We have our own crazies, and we have our own Trump supporters, which just absolutely boggles the mind.
I know, that's very strange. Trump has supporters in weird places, and some of them are just like, they like Trump because he's anti-China. And that makes sense in places like, I don't know, Japan or the Philippines or whatever. And it's like, okay, he sucks, but like, I get it, I guess, from that perspective. But then there's like QAnon people in these other countries, and that doesn't make any sense to me.
No, it doesn't.
No. This isn't what I wanted to start the episode off with, actually. Right. I did actually run into a funny little wargame adjacent piece of ancient news the other day. And you remember our good friend Osama bin Laden, friend of the podcast Osama bin Laden?
I do remember Osama bin Laden. It was a hoot that time we chatted with him.
We did not talk with Osama bin Laden. They killed him when I was like 16. I don't know. I didn't even know what I was doing back then. But yeah, so I wanted to just briefly touch on some of the games that he had on his disc, because I think that we can relate to those a little bit.
Wait, I'm sorry. He had a gaming PC?
Oh, yeah, he did. You didn't know about this.
No,
this is wonderful then. Yeah. I am glad I get to expose you to this. Okay. Osama bin Laden was a big gamer.
Wow.
Yes.
I guess I shouldn't be surprised with how everything is in the world, but I am
first of surprised. First of all, I want to point out he had a lot of Nintendo games, a lot of emulators of like Nintendo's gonna sue Osama bin Laden from beyond the grave. He had several of the Mario and Luigi RPG games, New Super Mario Bros., etc. Mm-hmm. He had his kids at the compound, so some of that was probably for them. But,
I mean, that might be the.
But Osama bin Laden is a proven big gamer, and I can prove this in a second.
All right.
So he also had Half-Life,
All right, Half-Life. It's a classic, not for the kids.
Osama bin Laden had some pretty good video game taste. He also, hilariously, had Final Fantasy VII, a game where you play as an eco-terrorist.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he maybe saw himself in noted anime twink protagonist Cloud Strife. But instead of saving the world from corporations polluting the whole thing, it was saving them with jihadism, I suppose.
I mean, that was truly the message of all Final Fantasies, isn't it?
Yeah, I think especially 7, though, is like the big one.
Don't you kill God in a few Final Fantasy games? I mean, I'm pretty sure they're ancient religion.
Yeah, it's been a minute since I've played a Final Fantasy game, so I'm pretty sure. But here's the big one, is that he played apparently a lot of Counter-Strike, and this to me is so good because, conceptually speaking, at some point between when Counter-Strike was released and when he was killed in 2011, you could have played against Osama bin Laden online in Counter-Strike Source and never realized it.
Oh, man.
You could have faced Osama bin Laden playing as a counter-terrorist, killing you in Counter-Strike online.
Like, it
this rules
to the absurdity of human existence in 2021 now, that you say that
10 years ago.
And I just believe you. I 100% believe you that there was Osama bin Laden was sitting there for 5 years playing Counter-Strike, planting bombs and buying guns. and that's just how the world is, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, welcome to the future, baby. This is just how things are.
I guess no one was thinking. I mean, I want to see the movie where a CIA agent teams up with Gabe Newell to go digging through the servers to track down Bin Laden.
Yes.
And defeat him in a game of Counter-Strike, of course.
One of the first esports tournaments of a Counter-Strike teams.
Oh,
and they're having the big showdown, and on the other team, Osama bin Laden shows up in New York City to fight them.
like he arrives in person to participate.
He arrives in person for the LAN party.
Oh my god. Yeah, I'm learning a lot today, and it's kind of, is it making me sadder? I don't know anymore.
Yeah. Maybe. A few other notes. He had a lot of Dragon Ball Z games, a lot of porn games on his computer, and a lot of anime movies. Specifically, he also had the Final Fantasy VII anime movie on his computer. So I think he was a big Final Fantasy VII fan in particular. But Osama bin Laden was a big gamer. But the most important thing, I think, out of all of this is that he did have a C-tier strategy game on his computer. I can't find it in this article that I pulled up, but I did see it from the CIA website before they removed the page for some reason. He did play Green Army Men 2 strategy, really bad strategy game.
I played those endlessly as a child.
Yeah,
because I had a computer that could barely run anything, but it could run. I think I got him like a cereal box. I could run the Army Men game.
I got Backyard Baseball from a cereal box. It was some good times.
Those games were all right. I mean, they're just bare bones RTSs, but they were something. They were fun. There's a whole lore behind the green and the tan Army Men armies.
I remember that, but it was only in respect to. I only played the top 10 shooter one. It was on Game Boy Color, I think.
Oh,
it was terrible.
Yeah,
it was terrible.
Yeah, that was not a great one. Well, the strategy games are pretty fun because they were Command. No, was it? Not Command and Colors. That's a board game.
Command and Conquer.
Yeah, Command and Conquer. That's the one. It's like Command and Conquer, only remove all of the functionality and all of the pathfinding. So technically it's a game, but not
technically. if you squint at it and look at it sideways,
if you're 7 and you have nothing else and that's on your computer, then it's awesome. And that was my experience.
Yeah. Anyway, as you may have figured out from our little intro here, this is going to be an episode where we talk about wargaming in the public space because of some recent articles that have come out, and Joe and I had some hearty laughs about these articles. To share a few of them, I mean, I'm sure that if you're a listener of this, you've probably seen very bad takes concerning wargaming before. This is kind of about think pieces in the wargaming space, talking about what wargames are when they don't know what wargames are. For example, I do want to point out for one of them is an op-ed from the LA Times. This was put out actually several years ago. This was 2014. But they said that football is America's war game. And that's fun. That's fun to me. Joe, after hearing that headline, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I think I get the fundamental connection they're trying to make, that football is a contact sport and has moving lines, moving front line or whatever, how you want to put it. But then I read the article and he tries to, I'm assuming it's a he. I shouldn't do that. The author is trying to make
a guy, yeah.
Okay, make the connection that because post World War II, since Americans have been so warlike that God, I'm not American, thankfully. They have transitioned from a peaceful people, which is already a wonderfully historiographically fraught term, to a warlike people, and have therefore shifted from baseball, a peaceful game, to football, a warlike game, which better reflects the warlike heart of the American people. And dear goodness, what are we talking about?
I love this article very much. He does paraphrase William Blake, the poet, towards the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of implying that one day war will be over and then too football will be.
Yes.
And the reason that football exists is a reflection of the fact that war exists.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that it's so popular is because we are constantly at war.
Yeah.
And it's buddy, America hasn't not been at war for any stretch of period of time. Like, the longest the U.S. has been at peace has been like 10 years max, like since our founding. Like, we've been fighting so much all of the time. Like, where does this come from? Like,
see, and you get a glimpse into the rationale, because he does address Canada. Because Canada, as I'm sure everyone is aware, because everyone fervently studies Canadian sports politics,
I do.
Canadians play a lot of football as well. But how do you explain, since Canadians are clearly not the same bloodthirsty beasts as Americans, according to this man, and here, and I quote, "The game is played in Canada, to be sure, but I think it's possible that Canadians are absorbed in the game roughly to the extent that they are absorbed in the values and worldviews of their neighbor to the south." So there you go. Canadians are bereft of any free thought, and the only reason we play football is because Americans play football.
That's soft power, baby. That's what it's all about.
Yep.
That's it. You're just aping Americans because Canada doesn't have any culture of its own,
Nope,
says this guy.
We just exist and look down and be like, that looks better.
What does that say about hockey, though? Because I would say that hockey is a far more violent sport than football.
As a Canadian, hockey is a horrifically violent sport.
Yes. I know this. This is why I said this.
I'm not a fan, but I'm not a big sports guy in general.
Sure.
Shock to everyone who knows me. But yeah, there is a lot of heavy contact in hockey to the point that it repulses me. And people will go in for the fights. Like, people like the fights, right? People will sit down and watch it just to watch people wail on each other.
People like the fights. And, there isn't a fight every hoghey game, but it's like common. Yeah, it's common enough that they've developed courtesy rules for it.
Yeah, and people have their favorite goons, people have their favorite fighting types, and they'll follow those players around and everything. And it's just part of sport. But I think the wider thing that this guy is addressing in his interesting way is that, all sport is that kind of conflict and conflict resolution, but abstracted, right? It is competition for who's better, but it doesn't end up with someone having the skull cracked unless you're playing American football. But the way that he's extrapolating this is America's war game, because it is a contact sport. Like, it is a sport that contains violence. War contains violence. Therefore, this is a war game, and therefore you have to have people who are warlike to play it. Is such a strange grasp of the concept of military conflict and war, and then war games and what their purposes are.
I think part of what explains this is the fact that it was apparently published at 5 a.m. that day. Like, the guy's up all night. He's like, "Football's America's war game," and no one is awake to tell him that he's wrong. I don't know. Like, what's so strange to me about this article, which we'll link in the description.
Please feel free to read it or disagree with us.
What's so strange about it is that I feel like he could have drawn a really clear connection between lacrosse and war games, because the Native American populations of America played a lot of lacrosse, and that was closely linked to their quote-unquote warrior culture. And it's like, that's not drawn here at all. He's just saying the U.S. plays football because war happens. And it's like, okay, well, I mean, outside of famous examples like Pat Tillman, he played for the Arizona Cardinals back in the early 2000s, and then after 9/11 and everything, he joined the army.
Yes.
Outside of very famous exceptions like him, this isn't a warrior sport, I guess. I don't know how else to put it. The U.S. doesn't have anything like that. That's the only thing I could think of that might even justify calling it a war game. But there's no application of tactics that could be used on a battlefield. It's just men hitting each other repeatedly for years and giving them concussions. There's nothing more to it than that. And for the record, I enjoy football. I want to point this out. I do enjoy football, but there's no application of it in the wargaming space, I would say.
Yeah, it's a strange one, because glancing back over this again, I didn't catch any the first time. He doesn't even talk about the fact that there are tactics in football, right? Like, you have you are pushing a line, you are attempting flanks, if you want to call it that, or flanking maneuvers, right? Or strategically eliminating certain opponents and whatnot. And he's solely focusing on the physical violent aspect of it, and I think that's missing the point entirely. To your point about lacrosse and Native American populations, that's just part of the entire issue, right? That people, how can I put this delicately?
No, get him, Joe. Be brutal.
That would be admitting that they're American. And that's not the way a lot of this seems to be handled, right? It's not talking about the original inhabitants and their customs and traditions, because that's not the in vogue thing to do, right? We're talking about the quote-unquote modern, American sport of football. which is not uniquely American, but definitely majorly American, right?
I would say so. I mean, rugby exists, and rugby is basically football, but like cooler.
Mm-hmm. And that's
Right.
popular all over the place.
Yeah, it's popular all over the place. I mean, like football is unique, but it's not very unique. It's not a uniquely just American thing. I don't know. Like there's a famous saying, and it's like there's only like a few uniquely American things, and football is not one of them. It's like the American Republic, something else, and like jazz are like the only uniquely American things, and that's it. I mean, because like America we haven't uniquely made the sport of football. It is not ours alone. We did do basketball though, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I think baseball is also American. I'm not sure about that one though.
Yeah, you're talking to someone who's probably about as ignorant about sports as can be. So I'm sorry, I'm not being.
I think I'm just saying words at this point. I don't know.
No, but I know we're ragging on this guy a lot. We're ragging on football and we're ragging on America, but that's not the point. The point is that this is taking war games as a concept and totally disregarding anything and everything to do with any sense of the word war game.
Yeah,
and doing it to drive clicks, I suppose. Because that's where football and war. And
that's your 5 a.m. article right there.
Yeah, but it's definitely hitting on the issues that we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah. Moving on to, I would say, the more egregious example of this. I don't know if you have any other articles prepared, Joe, but this is the one that kind of kickstarted. This is the article that kickstarted this discussion of we should do an episode about this kind of thing, about what wargaming is and means to the public eye. Is this article that came out in November of last year, in November 2020. The COVID is increasing America's lead over China by Tyler Cohen in the Bloomberg Opinion. Is it a Bloomberg Opinion article? Now, I want to say both Joe and I read this article, and it is largely not about wargaming. I want to point that out in advance. But it has a wargaming, quote-unquote, hot take that is spicy. It is a spicy take. It is.
Yep.
Ooh. I read this and I was like, whoa. You kidding? I mean, okay, I'll say this. This guy was kind of fried on Twitter over this, but we do need to address this one because it is specific to us, specifically. Because the gist of what he's getting at here is that the U.S.'s responses to COVID was very bad. And it's like, yes, it is very bad. But he says, because the U.S. handled COVID so poorly, that in wargaming estimations from China, they have to now account for the fact that the U.S. is willing to take more casualties in order to achieve goals because of how bad we are at dealing with COVID. And this is like the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, it's baffling because the idea that Eastern powers like China and Russia see and Japan in the Second World War see America as a decadent and weak. I mean, even Hitler said this, like a decadent and weak country full of soft people. That's been an assumption in Western eyes of these Eastern strategic planners for eternity. Some part of this fear of a declining masculinity in the turn of the century.
We're the Ottoman Empire, basically. They're doing Orientalism, but to us in reverse.
Yeah, this is part of this fear that this is how they see, and then it comes to bear periodically. But the fact that he's taking this concept and he's not citing anything, he's not talking about, like, he's not pulling from anything modern from China that anyone said about this.
Oh, no, he does cite someone, actually. He cites a tweet by one person.
Okay.
He does cite one man who said this opinion, and he's like, I agree with that opinion.
Oh, okay.
And that's what's baffling to me about this, is that he decides to cite someone tweeting about this one time, and then he's like, there it is. There's proof enough to link it in my article.
Oh, okay, yeah. So, I found the citation from a Chinese
just
gentleman.
A random Twitter user.
It's just a Twitter user, yes.
He's just some guy. Like,
but I'll read that tweet since that is important. Traditional PLA doctrine is that a sharp war against the U.S. is enough for deterrence because the U.S. can't endure many deaths due to domestic political pressure. So in some ways, the U.S. handling of COVID is a very powerful form of costly signaling. So this
reads to me like an excellent shitpost, honestly. It doesn't read to me like something that should be taken seriously.
Yeah, can almost virtually guarantee that nobody planning anything had to redo their estimations because America botched its COVID response so badly that they've taken these high casualties.
Well, I would say that maybe they have a little bit in terms of what a biological warfare inflicted upon the U.S. would look like. And if we're going that far, I don't know how many other countries are planning for potential biological warfare against the United States, but if they would, then I would say this might actually be a case study for you to look at. However, in this specific instance of what he's talking about, of a conventional war between the US and China, and because of how bad the US handled COVID, that means the US is more willing to throw men at Chinese forces in order to win.
See,
I love these jumps in logic. It's beautiful to witness.
On that point, I would say you would be concerned about doing your like you would be happy to go ahead and do a biological attack on America because 90% of Americans or what are going to just assume it's not real.
Yeah, like I mean, what is the thinking here? Is that Americans aren't going to realize that bullets are real because someone told them so, and they're just going to charge Chinese machine guns, and then they'll just say that this person died of a coincidence? But like, what is the thinking here?
See, the tragic thing. Okay, so now that we're talking about this, and my mind's starting to work again because I'm waking up because life is living hell of work right now. The idea that you can kill enough Americans to end their participation in a war is a thing, right? That was part of
Sure.
mid to late World War II Japanese strategy, right? On Iwo Jima and Okinawa was just inflict so many casualties that the Americans feel they can't do this again. You see that in the bombing in Lebanon, where I think 100 American soldiers died, or around that number, and then
something like that.
In response, they pulled out. There's some precedence to that. There's some idea of that, but the fact that we can relate that to a botched COVID response as we need to redo our strategic planning about a conventional war with the United States because since so many of them have died to this disease because they mismanaged it, clearly they will not stop fighting in a conventional war with China now, which will be by its very nature distant from America because the PLA is not invading America. That's my hot take for the night. But if this war is going to happen in Taiwan or off the coast of Taiwan or Vietnam or ships in the Arctic or any of these other potential hotspots, it's not going to be the kind of conventional war where American casualties are going to be influencing policy to the point that you can reassess it based on this botched COVID relief. And again, now that you pointed out that he cited someone, that his sole reason for writing this opinion piece was a man on Twitter saying that this is true, it just throws the shocking misunderstanding of what professional war games are into light, like, horrifically.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we're going to need to explain what war games are from a professional angle. But real quick, I do want to just point out, some Americans do think that China did try to invade the United States.
When?
Did you hear about this one?
No.
This is a QAnon. This is an original QAnon joint right here.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So this was in the middle of December. They thought, and I'm going to summarize this because this is not the point of the episode, but this is very important to know because it's hilarious. They thought that 50,000 Chinese troops were smuggled to Nova Scotia over the course of several years, and then they tried to invade Maine, and then they were taken out by a single F-16, which dropped a huge bomb that killed all of
them. and I suppose
100% thing.
The joke is that all 16 residents of Nova Scotia didn't notice.
Yeah, I mean, the thinking. I mean, of course, if you're trying to do logic with a few people, you're already too far gone. But I'll link you this article, Joe, and I'll link it in the description as well. They do think this, and so perhaps another reason we're doing this episode is to educate people more on wargaming and how this is not ever going to be a thing.
I'm going to hope that our listeners are along for the fun joke. if
you're not here and you believe QAnon is real, please go listen to a different podcast that is better equipped to handle you. I have nothing for you. I'm sorry.
Why Nova Scotia?
Well, it's because Maine is America's breadbasket, perhaps. I don't know. Like, there's nothing in Maine. Like, another podcast I listened to, Hell of a Way to Die. They hypothesized that maybe because Stephen King is from Maine, that they think that all of the supernatural things he writes about are actually real, and so they're going to try to weaponize the state of Maine against the U.S. But I don't know. This is just a theory.
Oh boy, I mean,
it's great. I love it.
It's beautiful in its absurdity. It's like a modern art painting, and but wrong.
Yeah. Ceci n'est pas une invasion.
Oh boy. All right. Well, I mean, yes, we plumbed the very depths of ridiculousness. Let's talk about what wargaming in the private, organizational and government sphere actually is, shall we?
Yeah, let's talk about that. Let me just pull up. For the reference, I'm going to pull up the textbook, the Oxford Languages textbook definition.
Oh boy.
Of what wargaming is. Instead of Merriam-Webster, this was the first one that came up for some reason. It's interesting. Is the action of playing a wargame as a leisure activity or exercise in personal development, or the action of engaging in a campaign or course of action using the strategies of a military exercise. So, wargaming, two definitions basically. One is for fun times. It's mostly what we do here. Mm-hmm. I don't think either of us are planning any actual wars, but so it's our fun digital game that we just do, or tabletop game that we do on our spare time, or it's something that militaries or military-like branches, I suppose police forces could also engage in wargaming.
Yeah, lots of people do it. Lots of different governments and private companies do it.
Yeah. I suppose private organizations would do it as well if they're involved in security and that sort of thing. It's them basically acting out what a military campaign or exercise would look like. You set up one faction as Red 4, you set up one faction as Blue 4, and then you just have them, according to their own rules, fight each other and see how that works out. And you learn from that to understand how to use your doctrine more effectively against them, or if there are any weak points in your doctrine in fighting an opponent that may run things that are counter to what your doctrine is normally saying will work. And that's the sort of thing that wargaming is used for, is to find out what your vulnerabilities are and improve upon them, so that way you'll be able to better handle actual combat.
Mm-hmm.
And a very, very long story short.
Yeah, and we can go back and talk about, 19th century. We have Prussians with their Kriegspiel starting to set down like rules for what we would see as modern, like, for fun war games now, right? Where you have a map, or I know in their case a lot in 19th century you'd have like a sandbox that you'd use, but wet sand to mold.
Love a sand table.
Yeah.
Love a good sand table.
Mm-hmm. And then now the big difference for a lot of these like organized games, these professional games, and what's happening, when people are just playing war games around a table or with an AI, is you generally have an umpire or someone who's supposed to be impartial to both sides, who is doing a lot of the randomization and doing the fog of war stuff for both sides. And when you have both sides working, like you said, to try and probe vulnerabilities, weaknesses, and this is the very traditional sense of what wargaming is for militaries, right? That's an excellent way of trying to figure out what you could do, what you should be doing, what the enemy is going to be doing, right? It's the best way to do it that we have access to through most of history, right? And I will take a second. There is the other form of wargaming, that is the taking actual formations out into the field and practicing and running about and doing stuff, and getting guys to lie down or whatever when they're hit and all that.
These are called exercises pretty frequently in the military as well. So military exercises and wargaming are basically kind of one and the same.
It's just different physical scale.
Different applications of it.
Yeah, both are very useful to figuring out what's going on. But yeah, I mean, when we talk about wargaming as a thing, I love to talk about the Second World War in the Pacific, because that's where you have a lot of very fascinating wargaming things happening. Like one of the most eye-opening things was speaking to one of my supervisors back a few years ago now, talking about the U.S. Navy, because the U.S. Navy extensively wargamed the Pacific. Like from the get-go, they were trying, hundreds of thousands of different combinations of events, trying to wargame every possibility of how things could go down the Pacific, depending on how they responded, how the Japanese responded, how different forces were applied throughout. And the fun thing with that is that they actually wargamed it out to the point that they had information for pretty much every encounter that they had, every battle that they came up. They had wargamed that scenario, with one massive exception. Do you want to take a wild stab and guess what that would be?
The Spanish Inquisition.
Yes. No, kamikaze suicide planes. Of all the things they were wargaming, they were not expecting the Japanese to do that. And that, of course, threw some plans into disarray. But I thought that was fascinating that they had actually managed to... They had done so much work on wargaming these things that all of that made a lot of sense, but they just could not fathom that would be something that the enemy would do. So it came as a bit of a shock, and had to...
It's one of those things that in hindsight, it makes a lot of sense. Like, they should have seen it coming, but... At the time, like, how would they?
Especially because when you get into it, a lot of different nations around the world were doing the same thing. Not to the extent of the Japanese, obviously, but the Germans had their Leonidas squadrons that were meant to crash planes into bridges to blow them up to slow the Russians down and that kind of thing. So like that's throwing your life away in an airplane is not a uniquely Japanese trend, but it was also not something any of the wargame planners even considered when they were doing this, which I thought was fascinating.
You think that they might have thought of it, when the dwarf submarines or whatever they called them were deployed to Pearl Harbor, there's like Japanese guys on tiny submarines meant to like launch torpedoes and beat sabotage vessels that were in Pearl Harbor on December 7th, and that's actually where the first Japanese prisoner of war was caught. He was one of the drivers of one of those subs, and you got to think the Japanese did not expect these guys to come back, probably, and you have to think like the Americans didn't realize for so long that they were willing to use equipment and manpower like that in that expendable fashion. The signs were there for kamikazes. They just didn't realize.
I think that there's and the difference in scale between squadrons of airplanes flying into things versus the earlier stuff they saw on ground with inefficient bonsai charges and refusing to surrender and all that fun stuff. But then let's go to the side and talk about Japanese wargaming. I'll link the video that I wanted to show, because there's a wonderful little documentary in Japanese, with subtitles, about the Japanese wargaming of Midway. And it's fascinating to me because the way they tell the story, and the way I've heard it from other sources as well, is while wargaming Midway, they had their specific plan that this is how they would try and fulfill the operation. And one of the younger officers, playing as the Americans, thought, well, what if I put my fleet over here? I think it was farther to the north. It's been a while since I watched it. And in that case, the opposition, the Americans, won because they came up on the Japanese fleet when it wasn't prepared and were able to do a lot of damage. And instead of doing what wargaming does and learning from that and seeing how can we counter this or how can we change operation, they were too far along, and it was already so strained with the political dimension of trying to get naval operations working in the Japanese Navy that they just said, forget it, no, go back, do it again, don't put your fleet there. And then the Japanese won. So, this is a prime example of letting the political and the expediency of an operation make you miss what wargaming is supposed to do.
Yeah. I think that, I guess from our perception, and I guess the reason for this episode in general is just people don't understand that wargaming does have this specific application, and they just kind of want to throw the word around, and they don't know what it means.
And I guess my point is that I can kind of expect that from someone writing a tweet-based post on American COVID casualties, or someone writing about football as America's war game. But it's fascinating to see it also coming from the elite of the Japanese Naval High Command, who are seeing wargaming, who have wargamed before for years, and utterly ignoring what wargaming is doing for them.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I guess from a practical application these days, wargaming is kind of in a weird space, because now people are wargaming what unconventional wars look like, and no one has really figured out how to model that super well yet.
That is always going to be very difficult, right? The trying to wargame insurgencies. But people try, right? That's a lot of the focus of modern wargaming, is trying to account for those kinds of tangential factors that you're not going to see in a traditional red versus blue field battle type of situation. And it's fascinating to know that people are taking wargaming and applying it to other fields, like not military fields, because I've got this wonderful book here called Wargaming Experiences by Natalia. I'm sorry, please forgive me. Wojtowicz. Yes, I'll write
something like that. I'm sorry, neither of us speak
I'll write
Polish.
it in the description
We're
so everyone can see it and take a look at the book for themselves. But she worked as a NATO war game planner for a long time, and she talked about a lot of the other applications in the modern world, like businesses and private corporations are using wargaming like things to try and strategize for their own futures, and scientists are using it even in terms like medical research, which is fascinating that this concept of gaming out potential outcomes is advancing beyond what we see traditionally as pushing divisions of blocks or cardboard shits across a map.
Yeah, and you can see it in applications in the cyberspace as well. Specifically from a military standpoint, but the companies also do this, is that they will do red teaming, where they'll send their own hackers against their own websites to try to break into it, find what vulnerabilities are there, and see what they can do to defend against this. And, I guess it's just an application that works in a lot of different aspects, but how it doesn't work is determining if the U.S. is willing to take more casualties because they suck at responding to COVID. Mm-hmm. That's not how it works. There's a lot of applications for it. That isn't one of them. Yeah, that's not one of the takeaways.
That's a serious misunderstanding of like what war games even do, I think, tragically.
I don't know. Maybe he thinks it's like a grand strategy game or something. I don't know. It's hard for me to like fathom what's going on there, because I think at the end of the day, the thinking of it is just wrong, no matter what.
So, what we're going to hit upon, we're going to talk about certain games, digital war games that are actually in use by different agencies, right?
Yes. Yeah. There's a few games that we know of that are used by professional military arms of governments or other actors. The first one I do want to mention is Combat Mission. The British Army uses Combat Mission for their officer corps to try to get them used to the idea of decision making. And Combat Mission is great because it's a turn-based WeGo game, which means that both sides go at the same time. And so they'll line up their moves, what they want to do, and then they'll both unpause, and then there's a 1 minute of the units just following orders from both sides in real time before it pauses again. And I think that's a really interesting way to look at the application of tactics in like a real-time environment, because they can actually pause and consider what they would need to do in these circumstances. But it also accounts for command delay by saying you can't do anything to change what's happening.
I always appreciate that games. Have you played a Combat Mission game? Because I unfortunately haven't.
I'm about to review one, but I haven't yet.
I was wondering how good the AI is, but obviously it has to be decent enough that people are willing to rely, at least on part, on its ability to like man-to-man maneuver.
Yeah, I think that when they do it for wargaming applications specifically, they generally will have it be human versus human. I don't think that they go up.
No, sorry, I meant in like the small scale of like how the unit will maneuver, pathfind, or deal with cover or react to incoming fire and all that.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. I don't know. I will play the game.
That'll be good. That'll be a good post on our blog. The Let's Talk About Wargames blog.
Yeah, the Let's Talk About Wargames blog, which you should look at right now. Pause this episode and go check out our blog, and welcome back from that.
But yeah, it's fascinating. I want to play it. I have the competitor, if it were you would call it that, in a WeGo hardcore simulation game. Where are you hiding? Yes, that's the one. Gravity Team Tactics.
Gravity Team Tactics. I really like that game. I have two of them actually: Gravity Team Tactics, Mia's Front, and Operation Star, and they're very interesting to me. But they're also very difficult to get into. They're very groggy. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, I've got Tank Warfare, Tunisia 43, and Gravity Team Tactics. Ooh, I don't know, one of the older ones because it's. Ooh. I grabbed that one on sale because they have a scenario set in the Angolan Civil War, which I wanted to try.
Yeah, I saw those. This is super interesting. Is that these? I will not that you have to hand it in under any circumstances to grognards, but they will tackle topics and places of interest that are more interesting than the normal. This is Normandy, 1944.
Yeah, so it is Operation Star. I finally found it because I learned how to work my fingers on a keyboard again.
Yeah.
And it's the Operation Hooper DLC.
Good for you.
Which covers the Angolan conflict with South Africa, I think. But anyways, that's something I really wanted to check out, and there are virtually no ways digitally to do that. So these groggy games are the way to do it.
But there is one.
There's another one? Yes.
There is one now. And I wonder what the open source applications of these are, like how moddable they are, because it would be very interesting to be able to visit other small 20th or early 21st century like conflicts with this stuff. Because I know there's a few games actually covering the Syrian civil war. It's still ongoing, so a lot of places don't want to do it, but there are some like Combat Mission Shock Force 2, I think is the most recent one, that explored the idea of a fight in that environment.
Yeah,
before it actually happened.
You know, the pull at the collar, look left and right thing.
Yeah, it's like, ooh, yeah. It was this film is dedicated to the brave jihadist fighters at the end of Rambo 3. It was like in 1980, whatever. It was like, oh, I think it's
Syria against a NATO alliance for some reason. And
yeah, I think that Russia might be involved to an extent, but I don't remember. I don't have that one, so
hey,
I don't know.
Combat Mission guys, if you want to send us some copies of games, we'll play them.
Yeah, we'll play them. We'll talk about your game. I guess so. We'll talk about your game more. Again. Yeah, go ahead.
But yeah, so that's one of the fascinating ones, because I know that Combat Mission, because it has its modern application, is, and I believe it's a little bit more user friendly, even though it's not by much, than Gravity Team Tactics. It has this professional dimension to it, where I think Gravity Team Tactics is purely set, not modern, and that's maybe impacting things.
I think it's trending towards modern, because the DLCs that are placed in the 60s and 70s, those are like the most recent things that they've made, to my recollection. So they might be moving modern, but between these two games, there isn't really anything else, unfortunately, except for CMANO.
Command Modern Naval Air Operations. Yes.
Air naval? I think you said naval air. CMANO. Yeah, it's Command.
CMANO.
Command Air Naval Operations.
Luckily, the latest version is just called Command Modern Operations.
Yeah, that's better. This is something that is used as a wargaming tool in a lot of cases. It's a for fun war game, but they've made a professional version of this game,
and it is fascinating looking at what it is modeling and what it is doing. So
yeah, it looks at things from a satellite's perspective, doesn't it? Like you're kind of like looking at things from a satellite, and everything is real time, and you don't actually see any units, just icons of them, ordering them around on what's essentially like a Google Earth map.
And you're spending a good deal of your time like plotting waypoints, plotting missions, timing things out, securing armaments, and then how to equip teams for different missions and whatnot. So it's a fascinating game, but
the logistics of it is insane. Like you can get really, really granular with it. You can say, I want my F-16s to be equipped with this many of this type of missile and give them this much fuel. It's crazy.
So because of that, you can see how wonderful it is to be used as a training tool, right, or as a wargaming tool in the modern sense, because it's got, basically you can try and game out any of these modern conflicts. And the majority of these conflicts that we're going to be looking at in the near future are probably going to be heavily centered around naval and air engagements, at least in the initial stages, right? So it's fascinating that they've taken that approach and pulled it away from the pure ground conflict, which I believe is still modeled. I haven't played it, but I believe it's still there.
I think the new one has it. I don't think the original had many ground elements. I think the newer one does.
But yeah, and
I don't know. It's a very expensive game.
Yes, it is. And the like original version is again much more expensive, because it is meant for militaries to be buying it. But the fun thing we found today, looking into this game, was that it appears, according to some of the articles I've read, that they are only selling to America, Britain, and NATO allies. So that means there's a good evidence to suggest that, air quotes, enemies like Russia and China are just purchasing the retail commercial fun version and using that instead
Vladimir Putin's Steam account.
And
Kim Jong-un's a big gamer, apparently. He probably has a copy of this saved up somewhere.
So when we go back to our Gabe Newell and CIA agent team up to get Osama bin Laden, we'll have a segue to play with Kim
That's
Jong-un.
the sequel.
Yeah, there you go.
They fight Kim Jong-un in Seamano.
God, I'm gonna play Overwatch or something. I don't know.
I don't know if Kim Jong-un, like he games. Look at him. You know he games. What game do you think he plays?
Oh God, I don't know. I'm gonna go with Overwatch. There. That's
He looks like an Overwatch gamer,
my
even
take.
after the popularity has died down. I guess so, because the popularity of it wouldn't matter to him.
If it's anything, I don't think North Korean leadership is one for passing on things when they're no longer popular.
This is true. I would say that he seems kind of like seems like he likes a Fortnite.
Yeah. I
think he's a big Fortnite guy.
A lot of building grandiose structures with no substance to them. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. And he can he probably knows how to do the Fortnite dances. I would say so. What else does he do with his spare time?
Well, I don't know if we'll ever know. Tragically.
I guess one day we'll know, and the truth will probably be much more horrifying than him doing Fortnite dances. Maybe.
One thing occurred to me that we can talk about in terms of the inappropriate application of Wargames. Do you recall, years ago now, there was a TV show it was on Spike TV in Canada. I don't know what.
Yes, I know what you're talking about already, and I love it.
Is it Deadliest Warrior? Most Deadly Warrior?
Deadliest Warrior! Yes!
Let's talk about
that. My gosh, we could do a whole episode about just Deadliest Warrior.
Yes, I've ever...
Deadliest Warrior is so good for all of the worst reasons possible.
No, I remember me and my my friends would like get together, get food, and then bet on which one we thought was going to win.
Oh man. For anyone who's listening that doesn't know what Deadliest Warrior is, Deadliest Warrior was a very hammy TV show that was on, I think it was Spike TV. I think you're right about that. And the gist of it is that they take two warriors or two warrior cultures from like various places that never interacted, and make them fight each other. There was like Napoleon versus George Washington, but they're like fighting. There was Leonidas versus, I think it was like Attila the Hun. It was like a Spartan versus a ninja. Or there was like a samurai versus a knight.
Shaka Zulu versus William Wallace. And William Wallace won, and I'll never forgive them for that.
Yeah, the one I remember most is the IRA versus the Taliban episode, because the guy who was there to model the weapon, because every episode they would have someone show up to model the weapons and equipment for each side, and they would like put them in algorithms and like say like, oh, we'll give this weapon this many points because it performed well in this scenario. And what was so interesting about that episode is that one of the guys that showed up to like display like the IRA stuff was almost certainly still actively in the IRA at the time of recording, and it was like obvious if you were watching it, you're like, oh god. Oh god, he's killed people probably.
But yeah,
and then there was the one where it was the Viet Cong versus the SS also, and I was like, I really didn't like the comparison between those two.
That bothered me. I still remember that to this day. Like everything else.
And the SS won, which was also very strange.
But the line they said was, "We're comparing two of America's most evil opponents ever," and I'm like, hold up, guys. Because
these guys just want their house back.
Yeah, okay, Waffen SS, sure, yeah, evil, like without a doubt, get it. But you're gonna lump the Vietnamese citizens who were fighting the third war in 10 years as pure evil? Come on, guys.
That was number 2 for them. Number 3 was Cambodia, and then number 4 was China.
Oh boy,
the Vietnamese were very busy for a 20 or 30 year stretch there.
Yes, they were. It's that line. Of all the garbage of that show that I watched with my friends, chugging popcorn and pizza, that line stuck with me all these years. That's how you not do that correctly. But guess what? Guess who was doing their simulation?
Who was doing their simulation?
Slytherin Game Studios.
No way! Oh, man!
Yep.
Brought it back! You brought it back! Slytherin Game Studios, for the record, is like the biggest wargaming company out there. They're the ones that make like combat. They produce Combat Mission and all these Aegead games. Like they do all of these games.
Yeah, I think they're just called.
And they were working with Deadliest Warrior.
Oh yeah. They've recently acquired Matrix, so they are just the wargaming publisher right now. But yeah, they were the ones doing the software. So that brings it back, because then they had this software where they would just take a guy and have him shoot a gun at a gel head so we could watch it explode or something. and then they would punch in numbers, and they would use that calculation as their scientific method for figuring out this who would win mythical encounter. And there are so many things, it's a TV show, it's meant to be silly, I guess, but there's so many things wrong with that methodology that just throws wargaming out the window, and into spiky bushes or something. Like, it's ludicrous. It's funny, but I can't believe that was even a thing, right?
Yeah, it's absurd.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna send you a video, and I don't know if we're gonna include this in like the description for this or whatever, but it's a clip from Deadliest Warrior where it kind of highlights the absurdity of the whole thing, where to demonstrate how deadly one of their knives is, they had a guy just stab one of those gelatin torsos as fast as he possibly could, as many times as he could within a window, and he's just like, he's going at it. I don't know what else to say about it.
It's a good thing that dummy can't fight back.
Yeah. he's like yelling too. Yeah. He's angry about it. I don't. Yeah. Maybe I'll figure out if we can like make a GIF of it and put it in the video description, because it is extremely funny to watch. It's extremely funny to watch. But that isn't what wargaming is, but I think that's one of the things that kind of tainted this perspective on what wargaming is.
Yeah, it's I feel like it's an obscure thing to talk about now, because I don't know when people who are listening.
Oh no, Deadliest Warrior has touched our Deadliest Warrior has touched our generation. Like, you talk to like any like mid to late millennial guy, like recent, like, towards the end of the millennial era, like, we all know what this show is. Mm-hmm. Like, everyone knows what Deadliest Warrior is.
Can you believe it only had 3 seasons?
I can't believe it got to 3 seasons. I didn't actually know that there was a 3rd season, because I thought they got canceled after 2 for being terrible.
Yeah, 2009 to 2011 according to Wikipedia.
Oh man,
beautiful.
But that sucked.
What I would want,
it sucked so much, but it was so good. It was like TV junk food.
Yeah, I want a copy of the whatever game, air quotes, Slytherin made for them to just mess around with. It was like a just very bad fighting game, if I remember. Oh no, not oh god, not the actual Deadliest Warrior video game, because that was atrocious. I mean, the software that they use in the TV show. I want a copy of that.
Yeah, that would be super interesting. So Slytherin, if you're out there, come on the podcast, give us a copy of that. I would be very interested to see what that looks like. I want to be able to create the algorithm for any mashup in the world that I want. This is what I want, I think. That's goals for this year, is to get Slytherin to give us the copy of their Deadliest Warrior algorithm, so we can finally just end all violence over the world by determining who would win in fights.
Yeah, there you go. Like, if there's a new conflict going to break out, you just punch in one side's shoulders, punch in the other, hit go, solved.
I love this. I love this idea.
Yeah, I think that's it for us.
Anyway, that's what wargaming is. This has been like our most. I love this episode. I love it.
Yeah, this has been
such a good episode.
On the eccentric side, but I think this is where we're at right now, and I feel it, and I'm happy with it.
Yeah, the tentative title for this episode, what I titled the recording room that we're in, is no one knows what wargaming is or how it works. And
do we?
I would like to think that we do. We automatically know better because we have labeled ourselves experts in the field, because we have a podcast, and
we do talk about wargames.
Other people don't have a podcast, so because we are podcasters, we automatically know more than other people.
Hey, we're authority figures now. I have a book on my table that is about what wargaming is, and I'm going to link everyone to that book so that they can also read it, so that they too can know about wargames.
Yeah, read that book. I'm also pretty interested to read it at some point. I have a lot of reading to catch up on myself. I have there's an episode we have planned for the near future that I have some reading to do for that.
Me too.
It's gonna be a fun episode. I think that we'll start to wind down here. First thing I want to say is we are looking for marginalized people in the wargaming community. We are trying to do our best to uplift marginalized voices in the wargaming community, and as such, we're going to be putting together a bit of an episode in the hopefully nearish future, trying to highlight the stories of people who are marginalized in the wargaming community, and to talk about their experiences and what we can do to help cut out a better place for them in the wargaming community. It's something that we both believe in, and I think it's a good cause. And if you want to share your story with us, please shoot us a Twitter DM. I'm at Jack_Trumbull. Joe is at Joe Fonseca Hist. That is JoeFonsecahist on Twitter, or you can email us at letstalkaboutwargames@gmail.com. We would just love to be able to hear from the community in general. It's just always good to hear from more people and to be able to put out there what real people are experiencing in our field, because this is a hobby that we love, and we want to make sure it's healthy and is welcoming to everyone that wants to be a part of it.
Definitely.
That was a lot of talking all at once. That's the big thing. Another thing is, I'm not sure when this episode's going to go out. Maybe later this week. I'm going to be participating in a charity stream.
Oh, nice.
January 17th. I suppose if this episode isn't going to come out before then I'll just cut this part out. But I'm going to be participating in a charity stream for the Trevor Project, which is to help house LGBT youths. It's great. So if you're interested, I'm linking it on my Twitter. Come, we're going to be playing Rising Storm 2 and Hold Fast and probably Squad as well. It's going to be great.
Good selection. I'll be there.
Yeah. That's, I don't know. I
think that's about it for us.
I don't have anything else to talk about. I'm all hopped up. This is our first episode of the year. I'm feeling good, kind of.
Yeah, we're going to be making some strides, I think, with the blog, with what we put out, and with some community engagement if we can, because we want, like you said, Jack, we want to do what we can to make sure the wargaming community opens up more in 2021. There have been some distressing events in 2020, specifically within the wargaming community. But for every one of those, there's been one or two really nice, uplifting things happening in the community as well, and we want to be part of that. So we'll look to a brighter than has been 2021 at this point, I think.
Yeah, we'll do what we can to make 2021 more optimistic, at least as far as we can. I guess my motivational message of all of this is that things really suck right now, and all you can do is help the people around you, and the wargaming community is a community. We have to do what we can to help each other.
And along those lines, we thank everyone who's taken the time to sit and listen to our rambling and hopefully laugh with us about these things or have a wonderful opinion to share about them. I mean, we love when you guys engage with us on Discord or in the blog or on Twitter, and it's just it makes our day to know that people are listening and like what we do.
Yeah, definitely. If you like what we do, please leave us a comment on one of our links on YouTube, or send us an email or anything. Or if you have any ideas for future episodes or just thoughts in general, like we're both be happy to speak with you. We're not so famous that we can't respond to every comment. So just hit us up. Love talking to y'all. With that, I guess that's pretty much a wrap. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll talk to you probably again before the month is out, but if not, probably sometime early in February. You all take care, everyone.
Yeah, stay safe out there.
Stay safe, and Godspeed.